Welcome to the Interrupted Podcast. I'm your host and founder, Steve Hallman, and once again this week, it is good to be with you. Whether you just found us for the first time or you have been tuning into all the episodes, this is a podcast dedicated to helping you and to teach you how to become more resilient in the wake of all of life's interruptions. Every single day, men and women are fighting for the life that they've always wanted. And all of the interruptions that we have in our day, in our week, in our month, in our year, we have to constantly be dealing with them and attacking them head on. If not, we're just drifting, and then we're not helping anybody. We're not living the life and fulfilling the life that we dream for ourselves and that is within reach, quite frankly. This is a podcast dedicated to teaching you that, and we do that through stories, and not just any stories, but stories of men and women who have overcome so much and are still continuing to work through things, but they have found ways to be mindful and to ask really big questions about their own lives, and they are attacking their life, and they're here to share their stories with you. So whether you've tuned in for a long time or just finding us today, welcome. I'm glad you're here. Before we get into this episode, which is a really spectacular episode with our guest today, Jermey, Harrell, I want to just take a moment and remind you that you should check out the landing page, interruptme.org. That is a place that you're going to get all the information you need to know about our guests, to know what Interrupted is all about. You can find information about me and upcoming events and things that I have in the works for the show. But another place that you can visit while you're at that landing page is the Interrupted store. And I want to take a minute just to talk about that because all the proceeds from that store through t-shirt sales, and we're going to have some stickers, hats, things coming down the pike here in a few months. All those proceeds go right back into the show. I have a full-time job aside from this, but this is something I love, I'm passionate about, and I want to get these stories out to you of new friends and old friends as they share their lives with you. But the proceeds from those t-shirt sales go right back into paying for all the cost of the platforms and just running the show and keeping it on the air for free. This is free education, let's face it. If you, like me, love to listen to podcasts, it's all free. And the amount of knowledge that you can gain and wisdom from amazing men and women is pretty phenomenal. So just a place to direct you. Those of you who have already picked up some shirts, thank you. Definitely help. And I've been getting a lot of requests about new shirts and the shirts that we just released, the flag shirt a couple weeks ago. So definitely check them out, interruptme.org. Finally, for the announcements, if you have a guest in mind for the show, email me, steve@interruptme.org. Send me a message. Feel free to even send someone you know and me a message at the same time, and maybe we can link us up and we can maybe get a show out to you if it's something that's going to be fit and for the audience out there, for you. I want to definitely get everything that you all want on the show to the best of my ability. So with that, let's go ahead, and I want to talk just for a moment about our guest, Jermey Harrell. Man, if you tuned into the show I did with Jeremy Stallnecker and he shared about the Mighty Oaks Foundation, just after that, Jermey Harrell reached out to me. He actually works with the Mighty Oaks Foundation in the events that they put on. And he wanted to talk a little bit about his story and share how he has become more resilient in his life through some pretty significant interruptions. He is an Army veteran, an Iraq combat veteran, and he experienced so much on deployment like so many men and women do. And at first he absolutely struggled to understand what was going on with him and understand some of the symptoms he was experiencing when he got back and as he was transitioning in life. And he had to really take a look really hard at himself, have some incredible self-awareness, and he's made incredible gains and has such an amazing life now, and is fighting every day for that life that he wanted. And he has now started an organization called Veterans Club Incorporated that is down in Kentucky, and he has so many events going on with this nonprofit, and it's one that I wanted to plug you into. I'm not going to steal his thunder. He's going to talk all about what his organization is doing and how it is helping men and women, veterans, first responders, you name it, through things like equine therapy, which was fascinating to me to hear about, and the strides that he's making in that. He has been recognized over and over again down in Kentucky for his work. You may have actually seen him on major news outlets as he's specifically talking about Veterans Club or the equine therapy. He definitely is a presence out there in terms of helping our men and women get back and deal with everything that life can throw at you, particularly in the military with deployments, and helping men and women address their issues to fight back and take back control of their lives. So that's enough for me talking right now. We're going to get right into this show. I'm really thankful to be able to call Jermey a friend now, and I hope to do some more work with him. And definitely give me some feedback. Get a pen and paper, write down, because you're going to want to take some notes. And as you listen to his story and everything that he's accomplishing with Veterans Club Incorporated. So thank you for tuning in, and enjoy this episode with Jermey Harrell. Hey, Jermey, welcome to the Interrupted Podcast, brother. It's awesome to have you today.
Hey, it's good to be here. Thanks for the opportunity to come and talk to you.
Yeah, man. No, it's I'm so glad you reached out, and the more we talked in our lead up conversation the other day, it's just like, man, I was really excited for this conversation. I even walked away from the conversation we had. I was pulled off on the side of the road, and I look forward to those just short lead up conversations, and the energy I had. It was something that I actually was very aware of when I pulled off to finish my trip going home that day, and just the few things that you shared with me, and hopefully the things that this conversation will get into today, I know have the potential to be very powerful for everyone listening today.
Absolutely. I enjoyed it too, and I'm looking forward to doing what I can through our conversation to add value to those who listen. And hopefully it's something that resonates with the audience, and that they can get some value from, that they can apply to their life, or maybe some aha moments. We'll see where the conversation goes, but I'm excited to have it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Cool. Well, look, in terms of just thinking through how we understand things, how our the scope in which we live our lives and the things we've tackled, I'd love to provide some context. Before we go into any depth, would you just give a little overview, introduction of yourself and kind of what we're doing, just to set the audience up to maybe have a little teaser about some of the things we're going to talk about today?
Yeah. So, one of the things that I like to focus on is, resiliency, overcoming trauma, dealing with challenges, and as the show says, interruptions in our path and our journey to lead the life that we desire, the life that I believe that we deserve. And I'm a U.S. Army combat veteran from Iraq. I went during the initial invasion. Spent 15 months there, come home, and was in the military for about 9 years total. Got some medical issues and got out, and then immediately went into the corporate world. And that was not my jam, to be honest with you, although I had what most would consider a good job, finally a safe job. It just, there wasn't enough fulfillment in there for me. I didn't feel like I was doing what I was called to do. So left that, and then started a nonprofit here in Kentucky that helps veterans through PTSD, traumatic brain injury, other trauma, life issues in general. Just really wanting to kind of get into the trenches with them and really help them based on some things that I went through. I went through PTSD and was held bondage to that for many years, a decade. Before I recognized that I needed to do something different, and that I needed to really continue to fight. Oftentimes when we come back home off deployment, or even when we get out of the military, we just tend to believe that we can kind of drop our pack. But in reality, we're always in a war, so to speak. The enemy may be different, right? But it's going from the enemy there in country to the enemy, the spiritual enemy that we have here. And so just navigating that and recognizing that this is something that we're going to have to work through till the day that we're not here anymore, and just trying to help others. A lot of the information that I use to help others are failures on my part, things that I tried to do that weren't successful, and was just practically a coping mechanism, but not really getting to the root cause of the problem. So we like to do that too. We like to get to the root cause and get straight to the source so we can get to healing faster. So, just that's kind of my background. Just so many things occurred once I returned home from my service, and didn't even realize it, and was making some terrible decisions. Sometimes not making any decisions at all. Some broken marriages, an estranged relationship between me and my older daughter that we're currently working on. Just a lot of stuff, a lot of lessons learned. And I will tell you this, despite how hard it was, I wouldn't trade it for anything at this point, because it allows me to use that testimony to go out and do things like this to really help others who may be caught in the darkness now. And it's much easier to kind of figure that out when you're not in the middle of it, right? But when you're in the depths of those rabbit holes, you tend to lose sight of what you need to do to get out of it. And I'm hoping today that through our conversation that we can come up with some ways, some tools to put in the toolbox to help folks, not just veterans, but law enforcement, just anybody really, because veterans don't have a monopoly over trauma or any of that, but just anybody who really needs to get over what's going on in their life, so they can get some comfort and peace.
Yeah, no, 100%. Those are all phenomenal things. I mean, it takes an incredible amount of self-awareness just to be able to look at them, and then just to have the courage to stare at failures, like you said, and to be able to not hide behind the shame that oftentimes is associated with those larger failures. It's maybe not a financial loss, though it could be, but when they actually hit to the core, and we're talking about family and your own personal life, people that deal with just body image, or whatever it is, it takes a lot of courage to confront those things head on. And so, no, man, I appreciate it and look forward to this. But, well, I mean, you didn't get to where you are right now, and you're not defined by what you are right now. But
That's right.
You've had a lot of contact along the way, let's say. And so would you set some context for us, and go back to where you grew up and what your family life was like? And I'm really always curious if there's any specific influences by way of different people, whether it's men or women, that were in your life, that whether you knew it or not at the time, really set you on a trajectory that you're able to reflect upon and realize, like, hey, that was a key person in my life, and a pivotal moment, just to really kind of set up some of where you're at now today.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because my walk with resiliency and overcoming trauma started long before I ever joined the military. When I was a young kid, I remember at the age of 6 or 7 of recognizing that the way that I was growing up in the household that I was in wasn't quote unquote normal as some of my friends. There was a lot of domestic violence. There was a lot of alcoholism, poverty, just a lot of challenges that I went through as a very young child, and just really not being able to understand how to overcome them then, but still learning and picking up little bits of nuggets as I went through life. My mom had me at a very, very young age. She was 17 years old when she had me, and my dad went into the Army, and he didn't enjoy that kind of structure, so he got discharged out of the Army. But it was just a really bad relationship. And then I just remember, growing up and just recognizing that things were different at my house than they were at some of my friends' house, right? And,
Okay.
and just really trying to figure out, hey, why is this happening here, right? Like, so why is dad hitting mom? why is so many people here drinking? Why are people, you know, why is there 10 people living in this 2-bedroom house? Just a lot of different
Right.
things that occurred when I was a young person, a very young child, not understanding what that was. But I had a great mentor in my grandfather, who was like a father to me. And although he was old, elderly, he had a lot of knowledge. Outside of having a seventh grade education, his life knowledge was phenomenal, and he would always be the one who would kind of narrate what was going on. Jeremy, this he would say stuff like, "Jeremy, this isn't how this goes. This is just what's going on here, and I want you to know that this isn't what marriage looks like, or this isn't what parenting looks like." Just different nuggets that he would pass along the way. And I'm thankful for that for two reasons. Number one, I could have easily applied that to my own life because that's what I knew. But I'm thankful for him, because up until I went to boot camp, um, he was always there, making sure that I knew the difference, and to make sure that I stayed on the path of breaking that cycle. And one of the last conversations I had with my father. My father passed away, unfortunately, last September of cancer. And one of the last conversations I had with him was when he looked up at me from the hospital bed and said, "You have broken this cycle. You have broken this cycle," because the relationship I have with my children, it's nothing like that. It's very healthy. It's very much mentoring and love and provisions, and just taking real good care of them. And so I had two choices as I was growing up. I could have used that as an excuse to do wrong things, right? I could have used
Yeah.
that as a way to get into drugs, to get into gangs, to get into just doing wrong things. But instead, and I thank God for this. I don't know that I can take credit for it myself. I'm sure, like I said, my grandfather had a lot to do with it. But I decided to learn what not to do. And when I changed my perspective, then I started doing the opposite. Because even when I didn't recognize what was going on when I was younger, I knew that if this is wrong, I have to do this, and this is right. And so it really helped me as I got older and left the house, to really have a understanding of what it looked like to be in healthy relationships, to be a healthy person, to do what's right, and things like that. So that was very helpful. But that come with a lot of stuff, a lot of abuse and mistreatment. And so the PTSD, the trauma, fire was smoldering already at that point. And then
Okay.
when I got in country, it was like they poured gas on it, right? It just kind of incinerated and grew, and just kind of instigated what was to become one of the darkest periods of my life. And so,
Wow.
I guess
If
one of
I
the
can,
things that I want to mention here is that for veterans, to don't lose sight of what happened before the military, because I went through years of treating the symptoms from my deployment, but not really wanting to deal with what happened when I was a child,
hmm,
because one's honorable, the other one's embarrassing, right? So it was easier for me to say, "Oh yeah, this is why I'm like this, because I was defending my country, right? Because I was doing what is honorable." But I don't want to tell you about this embarrassing thing about me being a very, very poor kid, not having what I needed, and watching these things happen. I didn't want to get into that, but I knew that I couldn't get better without addressing all of it. So just want to challenge folks out there, whoever it is, that may have that dual trauma, to really work on both, so that you can really get to the other side of it.
right on. What, when and how were you aware of, in your childhood, all of these, difficult experiences to observe, and then I'm sure in some level they manifest in your life in different ways
Mhm.
as a young person. But were you aware that this wasn't normal, or that, or life wasn't supposed to be this way, or was it as a younger kid you were just kind of doing your thing, and it's like, hey, I guess this is what life is about? Was there a moment where you really had some awareness and clarity, like you said, with having a good mentor like you had to point those things out? Were you asking questions, or was he just pointing them out to you?
No, I was asking questions, and when I was really young, I didn't know a difference.
Hmm.
When I got to be about 10 or 11, I really started recognizing that we're not supposed to. I'm going to school, and I'm hearing that we're not supposed to put our hands on each other. We're not supposed to solve problems through violence or any of that, or to hurl insults at each other and things like that. But at my house, that was standard operating procedure, unfortunately. So I was very confused at that time, like which is it? Because this is the only way I know how to handle conflict. And I have these teachers and these counselors here at school that's saying, Jeremy, that's not how you do that, right? But yeah, then that's when I started, making sure that when I saw something that was different, that I'd say, Grandpa, why? I mean, why is this happening? Why are people like physically hitting each other? Why are we doing this when we're supposed to love each other? Just some really good questions. And thankfully he took the time to really just because it was just only, I mean, he would have fixed it in a heartbeat if he could have. He just couldn't have, but he just wanted to make sure that I knew that he would say stuff like, Jeremy, that's not how marriage works, right? He would say that. He was like, marriage is about loving each other. It's about
Hmm.
taking care of each other, protecting each other. It's not about hurting each other. Just and because he wasn't highly educated, and he was really a country guy, right? And I love him to death. He didn't articulate it in any terms that we use today. It was essentially, we don't do that to one another. We love one another. Just always re-emphasizing love and what that looked like. And so that helped me tremendously, because then I had a baseline to grow out of, right? I could say, well, I know what love is and I know what love ain't, right? And so love
Yeah.
wasn't what I saw. So I'm going to do what love says to do. And I'm going to make sure that I'm there for my kids. I'm going to make sure that I'm there for my wife. And I'm going to make sure that uh, they don't feel afraid of me. So it was just these constant building blocks of knowledge that eventually led into a 17-year-old kid who was about to go to boot camp. But before I went, there was a winter storm, and I went through different senior living apartment complexes and took grocery store orders. And as I was doing that, just to try to help, I knew, number one, that I wanted to serve, and
Okay.
then I also knew that, what, this is a show of love, right? So
Was there a pivotal point that you had even friend groups at that point that were seeing a change in you? Did you have anyone that was pointing out that your growth as a adolescent and teenager? And the reason I kind of harp on this so much is I think it's important even for younger listeners
right.
to be as we start to look at the different choices that we have in our lives, and we start to have more self-awareness about some of the things going on in our lives, to really pick up on those markers and to say, hey, there's something going on with me here, with my personality, my character, my ethics, obviously your faith, which I'm curious to know more where that
Mm,
started to enter in.
right.
But in your own peer group, was anyone seeing a difference in you?
Yeah, they were. I had a lot of cousins, and a lot of friends, close friends in the neighborhood, and they would often, say things about me being different, right?
Hmm.
There's something different about you. There's something like you don't necessarily fit in with where you come from, and still to this day, when I have conversations with my wife, um, currently, she just goes, "What a blessing that you were able to come out of that environment and be
Hmm.
a person of integrity, a person of faith, and a person of service, who knows what it looks like to take care of someone else, and that I'm not a violent I'm not a violent person these days, right? And just deciding to show my kids what it looks like to be healthy. But yeah, all my friends, they would say that often, because I didn't do some of the things that they were doing. I wasn't in gangs. I wasn't stealing things. I wasn't getting into a lot of fights or any of that. I was just trying to learn. I spent a lot of my time, free time, so to speak, just trying to learn about how to get out of this. How do I get away and detach myself from this environment? And one of the ways to do that was to go straight into the military as soon as I was done with high school, and because I couldn't afford to go to college, and I knew that, but I knew that I needed to get away because I knew
Okay.
that I needed to give myself a fair shot at life. And the longer that I stayed in this environment, the less chance I had, because when I was looking around, other kids and even other family members, they were going in the opposite direction. Whether it was, prison, whether it was drug abuse, whether it was alcoholism, they were doing that sort of thing. And I wanted no part of that, because at the very basic level, I knew that wasn't what I was called to do, and it wasn't what I wanted to do. And so as soon as I had an opportunity, I left.
Okay. And so, I mean, getting into the military, did you feel like you had a proper perspective about what you were about to embark on? And were you even aware of, it was maybe not labeled this at the time, of some of that trauma, how that could start to impact you? Did you have any of that, or was that later on that you started to realize that, hey, the childhood that I came from is going to need to be dealt with in some manner?
Yeah, no, it was really interesting, because I didn't feel like I faced the same challenges when I got to boot camp as maybe some of the other folks were having. For example, I was glad to be in a fairly safe environment with,
Uh-huh.
with 3 square meals a day and a hot shower, and
I
I didn't
got you.
have anything to worry about. I didn't even know what to, crazy as this sounds, I was like, this is paradise. I have somebody who has it all laid out for me. I get up, I do the things, right? I have, they're trying to train and teach me. I'm learning things, so I had a different perspective in boot camp. And I will tell you that some of the folks in the barracks with me thought something may be wrong, right? Because they're like, why is this guy act like, why does he have any joy here? Like, this isn't a place to
Yeah,
have joy,
you're
but
not
man,
supposed to be enjoying this.
yeah. They're like, you're not. This isn't supposed to be this way, right?
Yeah.
But it was just coming from that much of a tough environment. Anything outside of that resembled any form of structure, any form of mentorship,
Mm-hmm.
leadership, was just like hitting the lottery for me. I just loved that someone was actually paying attention, trying to teach me something, versus trying to tell me what I couldn't do or what I wasn't going to do, or because your
Right.
family's this way, you're not going to ever become such and such, right? Those were some of the phrases that I'd hear in my home, and every time I heard that, there would be a burning flame inside that would say, nope, nope, we're gonna show you that that's not the case, right? And so I used that as motivation to get through some of the toughest times. And don't get me wrong, there were plenty of times in boot camp where um, I was like, I don't know if this was the way, but then I quickly come back around and said, it is. It's given me a fair shot, a clean slate, a new opportunity to start a career, an honorable career. Because according to where I come from, the people would say that I'd probably be in jail or something like that, and there I was
Okay.
serving my country, being very proud of that. So it was great to get there.
100%. Cool. What did your dad think? Did you have any level of relationship or communication with your dad at that point going in? And you had said that he had been in the military himself.
Yeah. So he didn't really say much about it, because essentially he didn't really fulfill his contract. Um, he got out because it just it's not for everybody. We know that,
Yeah.
and he didn't. And to be honest, as I grew up and got older and recognized that it was more of a pride thing with him. He didn't like anybody to tell him what to do. Is why he never worked for anybody. I'm here to tell you that my dad knew how to do so many things. He could have been a millionaire 4 or 5 times, but he just could not listen to someone else. And so that really, had a negative impact on his life. But so my goal internally, honestly, was to make sure that I finished. Right, I'm going to finish.
Yeah.
And so he never was supportive, but he never was like outwardly supportive of anything until later in life. He was more kind of caught up in his own stuff. No, yeah, he come and visited when I graduated boot camp and things like that. But it was never a, hey, great job, son, I'm so proud of you,
Hmm.
or anything like that. That come very late, actually, in the hours leading up to his death. So I just stayed focused, right? Just stayed focused, and I had folks all around me there that wanted to see me succeed. And again, my grandfather was that rock. He was there the whole way. In fact, I still have a picture of boot camp where he got down in the front lean and rest push up position with me,
Oh my.
right? And he's just, I mean,
What a
you
cool
gotta
image.
love him.
Yeah.
He passed away when I was in Iraq, unfortunately, and so that was very tough. But we can get to that, later on
Yeah.
in the. But yeah, so no, the military was was a very, very pivotal moment for me and what was to come after.
Right on. Now, at this point, were you starting to develop in your faith, or had you not had exposure at all at that point?
Yeah, so I hadn't had exposure at all. Um, I don't remember as a child ever stepping foot in a church for any reason, except maybe one time for a basketball league that I was a part of.
Okay.
But when I got to boot camp, and everybody at Mighty Oaks knows this story, but how I become baptized, I recognized that if you weren't doing anything on Sunday, that you would have to buff the floor and do all these things, right? And that's not that wasn't something I was interested in. So everybody was going to the military at that time called it Protestant services, or you had Catholic services, and
Right.
so they said, Jeremy, you want to come join us? And finally, I was like, well, I don't want to do this, so absolutely, I'll go join. Right, at the very least, it's an hour or so of peace, no drill sergeants, right? And so anyway, we get in there, and the chaplain starts talking about scripture, and I just remember it really catching my attention very quickly, supernaturally, faster than anything ever has, and I really latched onto it. That hope that comes with that, with faith, I latched onto it really, really tightly, and so I continued to go in the next couple of weeks, and then there was an opportunity to be baptized, and that's where I got baptized, was in boot camp
Wow.
at the chapel. So.
That's phenomenal. Now, what was your experience being being a man of faith in the military in terms of I did not serve in the military. I can only imagine the ups and downs and just what you have to be confronted with the multiple, large amount of lifestyles that are all coming together to accomplish a mission for the military.
Yeah. So as a young soldier, although I was baptized and I felt like I was faithful, I didn't really dive deep into faith at all until I got to Iraq. And when I got, if someone was to ask me, Jeremy, are you a Christian? I would say yes, but I wasn't living that way. To be honest with you, I wasn't. And but I also didn't have really anybody, and you don't really go looking for it in the military. You don't walk up to your platoon sergeant and say, "Hey, can you tell me more about Christ?" That just generally doesn't happen. And so, as a boy who never come from that, and then being baptized, the struggle was what happens after. I didn't have anybody kind of to coach me through that. So we fast forward several years and end up in Iraq, and I had grown in my faith. I had an accountability partner who I was deployed with, who was very, very faithful, and would really, we'd really, get on each other when we fell short, just with love, but that tough love. And so my faith was severely tested there for obvious reasons. I just couldn't understand why all these things were going on, and I was fighting with, well, God's sovereign over everything. Fix this, isn't this worthy of being fixed? How many more people have to perish before we get to that limit to where you say, okay, we're stopping this? But then again, I was still young, and still didn't recognize the separation of God and sin that he warned us about. That's what was going on there. So I got in a lot of what I would call verbal altercations with God while being there. But reconciled that, asked for forgiveness, and then coming back home with the issues that I had, it was like a roller coaster. I'd be really, my faith would be really strong at one point, and then I'd just be so tired of the things that I was dealing with that I couldn't. I thought, well, maybe God forgot about me. maybe I'm broken, right? This is what all these people are saying around me, is that I'm this broken man now. So maybe I'm not good enough. All these lies that aren't true, and we know those aren't true. But man, when you're in that darkness, and you just can't really see your way out of that. And again, because one of the things that veterans do so much when things go south is they isolate. And so I was isolating away from people, so I didn't give people the opportunity to tell me the truth, right? That this isn't what God thinks about you, and this isn't the plan He has for you. I didn't allow anybody in. I was pretty numb emotionally, and I did that to protect myself. And I felt like, I may be missing out on a good relationship, but I'm also saving myself from a bad one. So I weighed that, right. But as I started to, get into treatment clinically, I recognized that, okay, this helps like for the short term, right? So I could go in and talk to someone, leave, and feel a little bit better. But tomorrow, it could all go south again. So I started, wondering, how do I get a long-term peace and comfort from this? How do I really get over this? And so then that's when I leaned on my faith again, and I started to get back in church, started to surround myself with faithful folks and people who encouraged and prayed for me. And then I just recognized, and I tell folks this all the time when I talk to them, is that, I recognized that as my faith grew, these symptoms of PTSD and different things like that started to fall away very subtly, to where, the memories are now just that, but they don't hold me hostage for weeks at a time when I talk about it. Right. So that's, and that was always the goal. And I know that God did that. But man, it sure was hard to be faithful when it felt like everything in your life was going south, and it felt like everything you touched broke. It felt like everything you tried failed, and it's really lonely when you're in that space. And so that was one of the main reasons why I was inspired to start this organization. I had a great job at UPS as a manager, but I wasn't able to change many lives there, really. In fact, I was a production guy, so most people didn't like me, right? Because, you had to perform. So
yeah,
but so
there's
I left
a standard.
there. What's that?
There's a standard. It needs to be met.
That's it. And however you do it, it's up to you, but you got to do it. But so I wasn't always a popular guy there, but I just, going in, pushing packages, that just wasn't it for me. And as I prayed through that and asked for discernment and said, God, I was up in New York at a PTSD program, still trying to work on my recovery. And I remember, saying a prayer in this little chapel and just saying, God, God, just use me for what you want to use me for. I surrender. I essentially finally submitted and meant it, though. I've said it 100 times, but really it was a, poor, pitiful me prayer. But I just said, use me for what you see fit, whatever it looks like. And so then we started, doing, equine therapy for veterans. And I thought that was strange because I had never touched a horse. And I know that's really strange for listeners out there because I am from Kentucky, grew up in Kentucky. And I think there's a perception that everybody has 3 or 4 horses in their backyard in Kentucky. But
that's right.
but they absolutely don't. And so I never, I went to Churchill Downs where they have the Derby, and that was what I thought about horses at the time. And so,
okay.
When I started this program, which I'll go back a few minutes and tell you how that all come to play.
Yeah.
Is I went out to a program in Kansas called War Horses for Veterans. Really great program, still really great. And when I got out on that farm and started dealing with these horses, I just felt a level of peace, and and they were a beautiful distraction from all the stuff in my life. And here's the other truth, right? I don't want to make this seem more than it is. They also are big animals, and we have to pay attention to them because they can hurt you. So there's that piece, right? I mean, sunshine and rainbows, but that was one of the reasons. But you know what? As I got acclimated to horses and started to recognize that they are partners with us if we allow that to happen, and they're also great at mirroring our emotions. So horses are very intuitive, and if I'm anxious, the horse is anxious, wondering why I'm anxious, right? And so we kind of went through that together. It allowed me to regulate my emotions, because here's the deal: I couldn't pick the horse up to get it to do what I needed it to do. So we had to create a relationship, and that included trust. And trust is a hard thing in the veteran community as a whole. And so the horse was really good at giving me reps and learning how to trust anything outside of myself anymore. But and just also what it looks like to rely on something else. And so had a really good experience there, left and come home back to Kentucky. And the director there, Patrick, called and said, hey, is there any way that that you can come back out and do this Megyn Kelly interview on the Today Show about your experience. And at that point, I didn't know who she was, and I felt really bad because I think everybody knows who she was. And I said, well, I don't think I'm the guy, Patrick, because I've only been there one weekend. And I'm not really a horse guy yet. I can't call myself that. And he goes, no, let's just talk about your experience. So I flew back out, thought I'll do this favor. And sure enough, it aired about a week later. One of her salute to service, you can still look it up, one of her salute to service interviews or stories. And at the end of it, she said, and Jermey's going to do this in his home state of Kentucky. I have no idea where that comes from to this day. I never said that. But my wife and I are sitting on the couch, and I look at her, and I said, what are we going to do? Like, we don't have a horse. We don't have a farm. We don't have an organization, all these things. And lucky for me is she worked in the horse industry most of her adult life. She's shown horses. She rode horses at Churchill. And so she had friends who had horses, and we called them up and said, hey, can you help us get started? And they were very gracious and was like, yeah, for something like that, we'll definitely help. And so that's kind of how it all started for us in the equine world. So that's how I knew that God answered my prayer, because I said anything. And if I had a choice of 10 things, it never would have been horses at that time, but I wouldn't trade it for anything now,
right.
But it was just really, really odd. And then everything just kind of snowballed from there. We started to form this social group, helping veterans through their issues together through camaraderie and connection and through horses. And then we started doing other things. And then we recognized that there was a need. So then we had to become a nonprofit. And that was in 2017. And today we're serving 6,000 veterans in our region currently and growing every day and doing many more programs and projects. But I'm so glad I said that prayer in New York. And I'm so glad that I finally said it without selfishness. It usually was, hey, God, fix me, or God, take this away from me. But this time, whatever happened in that chapel, it was different. I asked for him to use me and to put me where he needed me. And he's done so since then. And because it's usually not where we want to go initially, right? He usually puts you where you should be, but maybe where you don't want to be, but then you end up loving it. And so that's kind of how all this come about in regards to running the nonprofit and working with veterans and their families each and every day.
Wow, man. Yeah, I mean, what a journey. To arrive at a place, that it's sounding was pretty dark when you were deployed.
Absolutely.
Now, what kind of time frame are we dealing with? When were you deployed and really started noticing, hey, there's something going on here. There's something I need to deal with.
Yeah, so I went to Iraq in the initial invasion 2003 to 2004, and I come back home the summer of 2004, and just really was just not a nice person. Very angry, very untrusting of others, very numb. Even
were you married at that point?
I'm sorry.
Were you married at that point?
No, I wasn't married. I did have a daughter. Yeah, she was 2 years old when I got home.
Wow.
Her mother and I never married, but we split up. So two big events that happened to me in Iraq is that our relationship deteriorated, her mom and I, and then my grandfather, who was my rock, passed away. He accidentally shot himself in the chest with a pistol that he was cleaning. Understand I'm in this environment dealing with that too. And I'm 7,000 miles away from home. We can't do anything about either one of them. And that was before they had any of the internet cafes and things like that. It was just really GP medium tents and DSN lines. But so I couldn't communicate the way that I wanted to, nor was I in the right headspace to figure anything out at that point. So, coming home, I had this young daughter, and when I got off the plane and recognized that she didn't know who I was, and then just kind of thinking about all the things that I missed while I was there. And so I just was really angry about all that, and then once I kind of got over the anger part, I was realizing that some of the things that people would do in the civilian world were causing unusual reactions for me. For example, crying, right? Anybody who would cry would bother me and create this anxiety, chaos of anything going on. People who walk slow, right? People who weren't who didn't understand, didn't have a sense of urgency, who didn't understand what mission purpose was, who were lazy. I mean, just so many weird things.
How did that manifest itself when you would see that or experience that? What were some of the indicators that were, obviously you get mad, but
Right.
how were you dealing with that at that time before you had any type of coping mechanism?
Oh, so, I drank. I did that often. And what's interesting about that is I wouldn't say that I was an alcoholic, and I didn't necessarily like drinking. I just liked that it made me feel normal, if that makes sense. So it wasn't like, yeah, this is great, I love bourbon or whatever it is. It was, I just want to be like these other people who are just enjoying their life and not worrying about anything. And the only way I could do that to calm myself down was to obviously be intoxicated, and I actually didn't like being intoxicated. It was such a paradigm of strange, revelations, but I didn't like to be intoxicated, but I could only relax if I was. And it was just, I never felt like I could find my way. But it was just really in survival mode for the next 10 years, or close to 10 years, after coming home. A couple divorces. My wife that I'm married to now, it's my fourth wife. I've been divorced 3 times before. Those were all in the midst of the struggle, in the midst of, trying to work out some things. It's hard to stay in a relationship when you don't care really about the person, or you don't feel like that you need to be held down by anyone. I had this thought that hey, I went and fought for freedom. You can't tell me anything. Like, who are you to tell me? And so that doesn't make for good relationships.
Right.
And so the I guess the straw that broke the camel's back, per se, was when I began working for a guy in Eastern Kentucky. I worked at this manufacturing plant, and my boss there was he was a retired Marine officer from the Marine Corps, and he just approached me one day and he asked me. He said, "Jermey, I'm worried about your cognitive processing, and I'm worried about what some of your employees are saying about you." And I said, "Well, what are they saying?" And he said, "Well, they're saying things like you're unapproachable." He's like, "I know that you're often very tired, as if you don't sleep well." He's like, I really think you ought to go get checked out at the VA and see what's going on, because something's missing." And and he actually let me go from that position.
Wow.
And so my response to him at that point was, "So this is what brotherhood looks like in your world. You come and tell me I have a slew of problems, and then you fire me, right?" And so we kind of got in a verbal altercation right there. But I didn't understand what he was trying to do. But the whole time he was really trying to help me, and he knew, man, it was such a blessing to this day when I think about it. He knew that I would not get any help if he had not let me go. I would just, because one of my deals was to work. I would just work and work and work. And that was the way that I avoided some of these things, was just constantly being ingrained in my career. And obviously had good careers, but everything else seemed to fall apart. So finally went to the VA there, and they put me through a series of tests and come out with, traumatic brain injury, post-traumatic stress disorder, clinical depression, a lot of physical things that I didn't know were going on. And then we just started.
What was it like to actually get a label? Was there relief in that, or did that create more anxiety?
Yeah, so it created more anxiety, but it was also a moment in my life where I knew that I kind of knew that there was something different. But as long as I didn't have a professional tell me, I could always be in that state of denial, right? Where I could go, "Oh no, this is just my new normal." Like, you don't understand it because you haven't been there, right? That was the way I got out of that. You don't understand it because you hadn't been there. But when I did actually get a formal diagnosis, I was like, "What do I do now?" Right? Like, what does this look like? And I remember someone there telling me, well, you're probably not going to be able to do this anymore or do that anymore. And I just couldn't live with that. I couldn't sit there and listen to that. And I just knew that there was something more in my life that I could do. And again, that's when faith came in, right? And I just started, praying, God, just, what is it that you have for me? And so that's, that having the formal diagnosis was it wasn't relieving at all. Actually, it created a new line of darkness, right? A new rabbit hole of depression.
What do I do now? Yeah.
Yeah. It was like solidified, right? It was like stamped, it feels like somebody puts a stamp on you. And then the traumatic brain injury thing, I didn't know what that looked like. Like nobody I've ever known had this. What does that mean? Does it mean my brain stops working?
Right.
Does that mean that I'm going to get early onset dementia? I had all these questions, and here I am, a father, and trying to be a husband, trying to do my thing in a career. And it was just very, very weird place to be.
What was your relationship like at this time with your daughter?
So with her, it was, we were seeing each other regularly, except I was very detached.
Okay.
It was more of a formal thing. Like I had, because me and her mother wasn't together. So we had this visitation schedule, and I would pick her up this day and take her back this day. And I mean, we'd have fun, but I was the fun dad, right? So as long as it was lighthearted, I would do all that stuff. So I would take her and go skating. I would take her to amusement parks, things like that. And then right when it started to get tough, it was time for her to go back to her mother's. And then so her mother had some resentment, right? Because she felt like I took the easy way out. Like I only did the fun things. I was the good cop, right, so to speak. And but I just wasn't capable, to be honest with you. I wasn't capable to do anything stressful then. And of course, this is years and years ago. But I couldn't be an effective dad because I couldn't even understand what was going on with myself internally. And so that was very, very tough, and the pressure, and see, nobody understood. There's 1% of people who have served still to this day. So you're dealing with 99% of people who haven't, and that's hard in its own right. But then dealing with trying to co-parent with someone who really doesn't understand, and she would say things like, how does a year and a half of your life have so much of an impact? I just couldn't understand it. Yeah. And I thought, well, I wish I could tell you how. I just don't know how, but I know it does, and this is why. So, but over time, and as I began my time of recovery and getting the help that I needed, and getting closer to God and building my relationship with Him, we started to reconnect again and started to develop a better relationship. It's never been what I would hope it would be. But there's still time, and God's still working, and he's still handing out grace, and he's still in charge. So, she's 20 years old now, and
wow,
she's got a job that she loves, and she's just kind of living life, and we stay in touch, and she don't need me as much as she used to, which is kind of hard, but no, I mean, we were just able, kids are resilient too. I think they're very resilient. They're able to come out of things. Thank God for that, and so, I just had to be real with her at one point when she was able to understand. She was 18 years old, and I just put it all out there on the line and said, this is what happened. This is, there's no excuses, but these are, these are where things went south, and why we were estranged for a period of time. And she started to be able to understand that. I was just very impatient to get to that time, right, where I could just let her know the reality of what was going on. So, but I'm happy to say that we're not in that space anymore. So
that's what a victory. I mean, while there's always more to go, it's nice to see that once. Even reconnecting with someone, and then at the point that you can try and realize that there's something to be saved here,
yes.
And to reach out and do that, just that general awareness. I hear that. Something I hear in what you're saying, I'd love if you could talk about it, and maybe I'm off base, but I hear a lot in what you're saying is you kept trying to create like this new baseline in your life through different mechanisms,
Yeah.
and which is exactly what is so intriguing to me and why I created the podcast and had conversation like this, because as we chase in even improving ourselves, right, and creating a baseline, that's also baseline is comfort to me. And as soon as we reach that, a lot of times the discipline and the things we were chasing start to go away, and the past creeps in, and it all of a sudden destroys that. And while we need to keep pressing ahead and continue to work on ourselves and continue to learn and continue to deal with conflict and deal with bad relationships, and where that goes is just being able to understand that what I'm doing with my life, even if it's negative, is trying to create this safe space that I feel good in. And that's not necessarily always the right place that we want to be. We want to be in the place that doesn't always feel so good, but that we're in control of it. We're trying to gain control of it. It's not just pushing us around and find ourselves drifting, side to side in this ever-changing baseline.
Yeah, yeah, and so I'm a firm believer in that you can only do the best you can with the information you have available at the time, right? We're unable to see what the future holds, and we can only use what we have. And one thing about me is that I never laid down.
Hmm.
I was always looking for the way out, and that's why you notice through the story is that there are those times where I tried different outlets, different avenues, had different approaches because I knew where I was isn't where I wanted to be, and I knew for sure I wasn't going to stay there. One
Yeah.
way or the other, I was going to find my way out, and I was going to turn this ship around and was going to overcome all that. And so that's why, the difference is oftentimes when we get in that space, it's very hard not to just give up, right? Not to just say, okay, I've tried everything, but there's a saying out there that if you're going through hell, keep going. Right.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of truth in that. And that's what I did. I just knew, even when my faith was in and out, even when I wasn't as close to God that I wanted to be, I just knew that he had something for me. But it was up to me to work through that, to ask him and to seek that and to find out what that was. And all these other things were distractions. And essentially, in my belief, it was a lot of the enemy trying to keep me at bay because he knew that there was a breakthrough that was going to occur, right? And so, I just remember when I played high school football. My coach would always say, Harrell, when you're running the ball, keep your feet moving, no matter what. Keep your legs moving. And if you watch, and of course I wasn't like him, but if you watch Bo Jackson, and I'm probably showing my age a little bit here, but if you
That's all
watch Bo
good.
Jackson,
Bo knows.
that's it. That's it. He would break so many tackles simply because he just wouldn't quit moving his legs. And so even that's something that stuck with me throughout my adult life is to keep your feet moving. And if I am going to get knocked down, it's not going to be, I'm not just going to lay down. So that's kind of the tenacity that I carry to this day. Obviously I have different challenges than I had then, but a challenge is a challenge. And there's opportunities to take stuff like that and turn it around and create victories. And so that's kind of the business I'm in now, is to help veterans, help other people in general. It doesn't have to be veterans. It's just the genre that I know, but to help people in general take those situations and turn them around and to, use them for good. And so that's what we've been doing now for several years and travel the country doing it. And so I love to do it, but I wouldn't be able to do this if I didn't have the story that I just told you. And there's a lot of that story, Steve, that we talk about. And as we're talking about it, I'm like, wow, I really hate that happened, or wow, that was really challenging, or that was really hard.
Yeah.
But I would do it over again if I knew it would create the man that I feel like I am today. I would do it again in a heartbeat. And so, we want to make sure that folks out there listening know that you can't really change what happened 2 minutes ago, but you can certainly make a difference in what happens 2 minutes from now. And we can't spend our life looking in the rearview mirror, right, and be able to be direct on our path in front of us. So, It's just real important for you to kind of pick yourself up, brush yourself off, learn. As long as you're learning, you're not losing, and then move forward and make the best of it, and make sure that number one, that you don't do that again, but you help someone else not do it either. So that's kind of been the motivation with me personally since all that occurred.
Nice. Well, before we get into talking a little bit more about Veterans Club and kind of get practical with it,
Sure.
I'd be curious, something that came up during your story, and I remember even saying the word at the beginning of our conversation. How do you help men and women and those that you have the ability to serve and come in contact with deal with shame? Like there's so much I think that shame encompasses, and granted we're have a short conversation here. It's a much bigger topic, but could you touch on that a little bit, because that is so defeating if we don't learn to deal with what shame really is, and that there is a way to deal with it, and which is I believe somewhat unique in everybody's situation because of personality and character and the tools that we have available. But could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so the way that I perceive shame is that it's really it's something that we kind of put ourselves through. I think that we emphasize our failures more than we do our victories. And I believe what occurs when we do that is we just keep being embarrassed. In fact, when I tell people when I go and speak at events, I make sure that I tell the story, the hardest parts of my story, the stories that would produce the most shame, because oftentimes there's someone in the audience who needs to hear that part more than they need to hear anything else that I say. And what's interesting is sometimes in these talks, I'll talk about what I would consider and what I've prepared for, some very good points. And I'll have a line of people who want to talk to me about that feeling of shame, that shame of not being a great father, of not really trying, of being detached and not taking responsibility as a man at that point in my life. That is a mistake I made, but I don't have to live there, right? So we want people not to live in that shame, because you totally have the opportunity to just turn that around, right? And that's what life is. Life is a bunch of reps. It's a bunch of I'll go back to football. It's just a bunch of plays, right? Some plays you score a touchdown, some plays you fumble, some plays you get sacked, right? It's just, I think life's going to do that to us until the end, and we just can't get so caught up. Now, it would be a tragedy if you didn't learn from it and you continued to do those things that made you feel ashamed. But as long as you're learning, and then you go back, and some of the most beautiful things that people's ever done has come from those moments. And I just like to encourage people in those moments to say, you know what, feel that, just so that you learn from it, just so that you feel that it's uncomfortable, and just so that it not motivates you, because motivation is temporary, but it gives you the discipline to come out of that, so that you don't live there anymore. And it's it's like walking up to the stove and touching it and realize, wow, that's hot. You don't do that twice. Just simplifying shame so that it doesn't hold you hostage, because it can. I've met people who they've had a couple shameful moments in their life where they just can't do anything else but live in that moment, and so they're just cheating themselves. So that's kind of the way that I help folks overcome shame. Is it's just a thing that happened, and what did you learn from it? How did you grow from it? And what do you do now when that situation comes back into play? And that's the most important thing, is how you move forward.
Yeah, no, and that part of hearing just pieces of your story, I think what it does is it creates a level of hope as we have a connection. So as our stories intersect, as the audience stories intersect with your story, with my story, it creates a level of hope to realize we're not in this alone, which is that whole pit of a lot of times where the anxiety and depression and the depressing thoughts come in, and to allow us to realize, hey, there is another side. Now, hope is not a plan, as they say, right? But you need to have hope. So I often push back when people criticize the word hope. I think hope is very important. It's when you can see the other side, you just don't necessarily have the course of action to get there at the time. And so you really kind of have to decide that I'm going to find the path. And what I love about what I've heard with your organization is you guys are creating that path for veterans to be able to say, hey, there is something special, there is something innate, there is something beautiful about you as a human being. You're in a really bad spot, and we want to create options to get there. So if you could tell us a little bit, even just very practically, for people that are out there hearing this, how do they get involved, and what does it look like to show up at equine therapy? That it's this engaging time with this really large animal. And when I met my wife, she was actually a director dealing with a lot of horses at the time, and I used to joke with her and be like, horses kill people, I don't want anything to do with them. Because they're large animals. I used to always just kind of get on her case. I was like, no, I don't want to touch that horse. Horses kill people. But totally joking. But anyway, I digress. What does it look like to show up and engage in something like that?
The horses are great segues into conversation. So the horses, I don't want anybody to get, I don't want it to be misunderstood that the horses don't do the healing, but they create great conversations that create healing, right? They are good segues into conversation. It's easier to talk about your worst day when you're brushing a horse versus sitting on a couch or in a chair in front of someone when they ask you, what is it that brought you here today? It's much easier to talk about that when you have that distraction and that neutral moment. And so, to come out to our program, the way that it's set up, number one, the foundation is that we want to create connection with vets with other veterans, right? We believe, and it's been proven in the work that we've done, that connection is the way out of veteran suicide. To have that brotherhood, that sisterhood, that community is how we keep people from taking their own lives. And so the first thing that we want to make sure that we do, which is why, when we're out there, we pair two veterans up to each horse, so they can have that cross talk when they're learning about horsemanship and when we're talking about these hard conversations. But the other thing I tell them to do is it's time for you to be selfish out here. We're going to be out here for about 5 or 6 hours, and I want you to focus only on you for 5 or 6 hours, because we don't get an opportunity in our life usually to just focus on ourselves. And I wish that we could we could promote that more as a society, that it's not selfish to take care of yourself, right? So we talk to them about, this is a day of self-care too, and it's a safe place to come to talk about some of these things with other folks who totally understand and who totally aren't going to judge you, and some things that you can't tell your family or your spouse or others in the community, or you can't tell your boss. We have a lot of people who are still serving, whether it be serving in the military or serving in law enforcement or something that can't exactly go to their boss with some of these issues, because unfortunately they can be career killers. And so it's very important to us that we have confidentiality out there. So it's an opportunity to go and be together, learn some horsemanship, because there's a lot of life lessons in working with these animals, and just really working through some of the stuff that we carry around. I tell them, I want you to offload that, to put that all out here in the barn, right? And we have this what's said in the barn stays in the barn, kind of mentality. But let it out. You got to let it go. We got to work through some of this. And what's interesting is, as we're sitting there in the barn together and we're talking about these hard topics, how much support that everyone's getting from everybody else. I'm just a facilitator, right? What in the beginning, they look at me as the guy that has all the answers, and I have to remind them quickly that I don't. Right? I tell them that I'm here with you, and we're doing this together, because I don't have it all figured out. But But as we start to open up and as we start to talk about a lot of these same things that we're talking about here today, you see everybody, oh, I remember when that was happening to me. This is what I did, or this helped me, or that's exactly what I'm going through. And just that level of support alone is very, very healing. When we're done out there and we get all the work done that we're doing, and we, navigate what it looks like to overcome these challenges, you see these folks exchanging phone numbers, they're sending friend requests and stuff like that on social media, and they develop this relationship that's going to continue even when we're not together. That's how we validate our success. Is
Phenomenal.
will this stop when they leave the barn, or will these folks continue to support each other when we're not around? Because we can't be all the time. And so what's really neat is when you see them continually doing things together, supporting each other. And then, we do some other things. We have other events that we have, and we create this huge community of people who understand. Because that's one thing that I recognized when I was going through my recovery, is I always felt like no one understood me. So we created 6,000 veterans who understand each other. So that's not a barrier anymore, right? If you
Right.
we do about 100 events a year together. That's plenty of time to get connected with those who understand. But to also, one of my points to make is also don't think for a second that someone outside the ranks can't be of value in your life, and to make sure, because there is a something going on in the veteran community where they often believe that civilians don't understand, or those who haven't served don't understand. But that's totally not true. Some of the best advice I've ever gotten in my life that helped me get on the other side of this come from people who didn't serve in the capacity that I did, but have served in church, pastors, jail ministry. I mean, just there's a lot of people out there who have a lot of good information. And what I remind these folks is that as long as it's Christ centered, it's all coming from the same book, and we're all on the same page, no matter what we did for a living. And so that's kind of how we attack it, and it's a lot of case by case. But it's just really an opportunity for them to offload while learning the skill, because veterans love to work with their hands, and so they're getting confident in working with these big animals. They're becoming leaders again. They're leading them around the arena, around the round pen, and the obstacles that we do, and they just get an opportunity to leave with that life and that confidence that they have been missing for a long time. But also, they leave with the tools they need to succeed when things go south again, because they will, right? Because that's life.
Right on. Yeah, no, challenges are going to constantly come, and that's what we got to prepare for. Now, what's the duration of something? Is it a weekend? Is it a week-long program, or what, when you do the events?
Yeah, so it's a Saturday. It's a Saturday event. We do at least twice a month. We choose a topic. For example, we just had one last Saturday. We chose the topic of forgiveness. Sometimes it's anger. Sometimes it's marriage. Sometimes it's parenting. When it comes to marriage and parenting, we bring in a licensed marriage and family therapist to support us as we have these conversations. But we try to pick a topic. Now, organically, whatever happens, we roll with it, because we don't want anyone to feel like they can't speak what they need to speak. But we try to have a topic, just because if they go every once a month for 12 months, then they get through the whole curriculum. And now they have all these tools in their toolbox for all these different, like character and brotherhood and discipline and money and possessions and margin and purity, all these different topics that are part of authentic manhood that they get to fill their toolbox with. So that's kind of the way that we do that. We want to see them, and then there's no limit. So if there was someone who wanted to come every time we had one, we welcome that. And then those folks become mentors, and then now they're ministering to others, and it's just, and through that comes healing, right? That's one of the ways that I got better, was because I wasn't so focused on myself. I was able to use what was the shame that we talked about earlier. I was able to use what I learned from that to ensure that this person over here don't go through that, right? So that was very, very healing. And so we just create this huge community of people who are truly looking out for each other, just like they were when we were in country, right? We fought for those who were to our left and right. And I still want that culture to be prevalent today, even when we don't wear the uniform. And so that's what's occurring within our organization.
Man, no, that's incredible, and I can only imagine some of the stories that come out of those days out there at the barn. Now, is that the only event, or do you guys do other types of events, or is
Yeah.
that the
So
main focus?
no, so that's my don't tell my board, but that's my favorite, right? Because it's personally helped me. So I
Yeah.
facilitate all of those
Okay.
along with some other another team of folks. But we have Kentucky's first and only tiny home community for homeless veterans. It's a healing and
Wow.
recovery program that we have. So as I've worked with veterans and done a lot of outreach in the homeless community, um, I kept seeing that they had these Band-Aid stations where you can go for 30 days or you can go for 60 days, but then you had to leave between 7 a.m. and 5 p.m. And
Okay.
we decided that we wanted to do something different. We decided that we wanted to get to the root cause. And what's big in our organization and our leadership team is we're focused not on simply addressing symptoms, but we're focused on getting to the source. We want to stop the bleeding, right? We want to help these people heal. And so the way that we run our homeless program is that veterans come in, they get to live in one of these. They're actually nice. They're only 360 square feet, but they're very nice homes. They have granite countertops. I don't even have granite countertops in my home. So they're living really good, but they come in and they get all this support. They get clothing allowance. We give them gift cards for food. We fill the refrigerator. We really want to take away all the distraction, all the barriers that would keep them from retaining the information and the education and the therapy that we offer, so that they can leave our program after a year if it takes that long. Sometimes it doesn't. They can
Hmm.
leave our program and live successfully in the community. And we want to see them again, but not through a revolving door of shelters. So we put a little extra time, and it's a little extra money, and it's harder, but it's much more rewarding because we want to give them an opportunity to get to the cause of their circumstances, not just try to make them feel better for a short amount of time, but to really just
Right.
help them overcome the challenge. And it's so cool to watch when we're able to do it. I mean, we don't always have anybody out there who would say they had 100% success rate. That would not be accurate. But I tell you, the ones that succeed, the ones that come in there and they're ready to get better and they're ready to do the work, and to watch them go out and be successful is very, very. It's just a great thing to see. In fact, there's a gentleman that left, and he finally got a house, and he's got a garage door opener, and he come over to the community, and our office is set up there as well because we have a community
Hmm.
center right next to it that we hold
Nice.
classes and training and things like that. He come over, he had a garage door opener, and I've never seen a man so proud to have a garage door opener. But it's something that we take for granted, right? He
Yeah.
says it's not so much about the garage door opener, it's more about that it's mine, that I
Hmm.
have something. And man, that is the fire, right? That's what keeps you fired up about doing this, because I don't have a salary to do this. I do this simply because I love my brothers and sisters, and I want them to get better. I want them to have a life that God has designed for them. I want them to live with that purpose, whatever that is.
Yeah.
But what I do know about God is that He doesn't intend for us to be in those circumstances, and so we want to help them to get out and to get better, and to see them again out in the community at jobs and just doing life. So that's one of our other main programs that we have. And we also do vocational training. We have a really interesting program called Operation Jeep Build. In fact, in September, we'll reveal our first restored Jeeps, but
Oh,
we
cool.
go out and we find these Jeeps in the middle of fields all across the state, and we ask these folks if they want to donate them, and oftentimes they do, and we bring them to the shop. We have a good relationship with some master technicians who work specifically with Jeep, and so we take these Jeeps and we break them all the way down to the frame, and then we restore them into these off-road machines, because then we take them out on trails with their families. Um, but throughout the process, the veterans are worried about the Jeep. And I just love what's happening in the shop, right? I love the
Right.
conversations. I love the camaraderie, the bonding, the friendships. And so the end goal of this program is for veterans to build their own Jeep, but they don't know that until it's time to turn over the keys, right? So we get four or five of these Jeeps donated. we train them, and they get taught, how to weld, how to paint, how to use power tools, all the things.
Man.
And then throughout the process, when they say, what color do you think this Jeep will be? And what would you do if it was yours? Right. And then at the end of the day, they get the key. And so now they have a Jeep in their driveway that every time they walk out of their door, they can say, I did that. Right. I put that together. I restored that Jeep. So that's, that's something else that we do too. And we do a lot of outreach events too within the homeless community, and especially substance abuse. We teach life skill classes in rehab facilities, as well as jails and prisons for incarcerated veterans. So we have about 14 different programs. We have a Lady Vets program where we take care of our female veterans and make sure that they know that their service is equally important and that they're honored as well. So we're just trying to cover all bases, all angles, because we want these folks to have a good quality of life. They've earned it.
Yeah. Wow, man. No, what a far-reaching organization you have, and I know you're touching a lot of people. What of where can people connect? What are some of the platforms and ways they can connect with you and the organization and get as much information? Obviously, we'll sync everything up in the show notes and that people can click and grab whatever they need. But would you go ahead and just share some of that for everybody that's just listening?
Yeah, sure. So our website is veteransclubinc.org. You can get a hold of us there. You can subscribe to our weekly newsletter. You can kind of see what all our programs look like and what we're doing. Obviously, so all social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We're on there too at Veterans Club. We do have an interesting private Facebook page called Veterans Club Kentucky, and we're in the process of doing that all over the country in different states.
Oh, cool!
South Carolina is next. But what this it's a private group, and the reason why it's private is because we want to make sure that veterans have an outlet in between events. That's where a lot of the really cool stuff that we do occurs there. You'll see different kind of posts, anything from, hey, I'm at a bar, I've had too much to drink, can anybody come get me? And I'm a nerd, so I did some industrial engineering at UPS.
Okay.
And so I did like time studies and production and things like that. So I'll look at that, and I remember someone posting about that, and then within 4 minutes there was 23 veterans who volunteered to come pick that person up and take them home and sit with them. So that happens. We've seen people gift others with washer and dryers, fix cars, do plumbing, grab a pizza. I'll help you with your lawn, whatever it is. But just
true community.
Just so much community and love, and there's no reason why we couldn't have that, right? Because as I was traveling, and now that I'm a facilitator at most of these programs, but when I was going through that, I would always hear, I don't necessarily miss the job as much as I miss the community. And I thought, well, we can still have that, even with, in my case, when you can't fit in your uniform anymore, right? Like we can still have that level of community. And so we try to recreate that as well. So even when we're not having events, there's plenty of support on that platform. So the reason I say this is if you're a veteran and you want to get connected in a more personable way, please join that. It asks 3 easy questions, and we'll accept you into the group. And it's just a very, very safe place to talk about whatever, but also to share resources and just to connect with others. So be a part of that if you want to. You don't have to live in Kentucky. In fact, the goal for our organization is to be in every state in the United States. And I think that's going to happen. It's happening quicker than I imagined. And that just lets you know that there's a need out there. So connect with us, and we'd love to have you be a part of the Veterans Club family.
Right on, man. No, it's so good. And I just commend you on, the work that you're doing. And the more I've learned about it, had conversations with you, been checking stuff out online. There's so many avenues for men and women to really connect with what you're doing. And it just goes in conjunction with people out there willing to serve and give back and restore some hope and to folks' lives that have lost so much hope. And there's so much good life to live. There's so many good good things happening. So I just commend you, man. If there's any way the podcast can help you out, please continue to reach out. I look forward to hopefully having another conversation sometime in the future and hearing more about what you're doing. And hey, maybe I can even get to an event and actually see it in person, which would be pretty awesome. So
hey, I'd love for that to happen. You're always welcome. Open invite here.
Oh man, I appreciate it. No, man, thank you for taking the time today, Jeremy. This has been so incredibly helpful for me in this conversation, and I know there's a lot of men and women out there that just needed to hear a good word like this, and for a man that's so committed to helping others. So thank you.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure, and I just want the folks out there listening to know that feel free to connect with me personally if I could ever be of service. It doesn't matter if you're a veteran or not. That's just what we do, but that's not the limitations that we put on ourselves. We want to be good for people because that's what God wants us to do, right? So feel free to reach out personally if you ever need anything, and I'll do my best to try to help out any way I can.
Right on, man. Hey, thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.